Hello, everyone. I'm Karl Thidemann with Soil4Climate, and I'm honored to be here today with Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio. For the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be discussing Tim's views on regenerative agriculture, on restoring soil as a way to improve the nation's economy, to help fight climate change, and to improve public health. So, Congressman, it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Great to be with you. I'm very excited for this.
Delighted to see this happen. I'd like to begin by having the Congressman talk a little bit about his path toward regenerative agriculture and how you first learned about soil, perhaps who some of your teachers and mentors have been, and anyway, if you could just
so I got to go back to I wrote a book in 2000, and I think 11, 12 I started writing a book on mindfulness meditation, believe it or not. And I was doing a bunch of research about stress on the body, and I started to really see that what was really debilitating for the body was stress, but it was also diet. And so then I got into a whole initiative around writing a second book around food, and the book's called The Real Food Revolution. And as I was doing research for The Real Food Revolution, I got into kind of the agriculture piece of the food and how our food was affecting our health, but you really couldn't do any research on health and food without getting into agriculture. So that began the process of me learning about how we're losing bees as pollinators, what was happening to our soil, what was happening to the runoff that I was seeing in Ohio with the algae blooms on the Great Lakes. We've been dealing with that problem for a while. And so the idea of a new and better way of doing agriculture became very apparent to me that was something really important. And then I got interested in it. I mean, I'm from like a Rust Belt congressional district, Youngstown, Ohio, Akron, Ohio, and I represent Ohio. So we do have ag interests in Ohio, very much old school, but also learn more and more about some of these specialty crops that are just like fruit and vegetables that we call, they're all special now all of a sudden. And then I started meeting more people who introduced me to people like Gabe Brown. So I immediately bought Gabe's book and read his book and had conversations with Gabe and Alan Williams. And in my book, The Real Food Revolution, I talked a lot about urban agriculture, about what Will Allen's doing in places like Milwaukee and how we can build out the urban ag too as an opportunity to stimulate development. So anyway, and now I watch videos and all my new my ag friends are sending me all kinds of good stuff to read. So I'm super pumped about it because I think the country is looking for new solutions. And I think when they hear about this kind of things we're going to talk about today, people get excited because it's so practical and makes a lot of sense.
Excellent. I should also, at this point, thank the good folks here at WBUR, whose studio space we're using, as well as the folks on your staff, and Stefan Gordon, the Soil4Climate member, who helped to make the connection with your campaign.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative to all of them.
Stefan keeps me very abreast of happenings.
Keeps all of us on our toes. And it might be helpful just to lay out a little bit about some of the issues with industrial agriculture. We've seen a great deal of soil erosion. We have the issue of ocean dead zones. I understand there are several hundred of them around the world from the runoff of agricultural chemicals. In many parts of the United States, there's more soil runoff per acre than the actual tonnage of food being produced per acre, which is a pretty shocking statistic. There are estimates that if we keep going as we are doing by plowing the land, applying fertilizers, which many people think are beneficial to the land, but in fact they interfere with soil health. There are estimates that we only have about 60 years on average of growing seasons.
And that was a United Nations climate study. Yeah.
So we obviously need to make a sea change in how we approach land management. And could you talk a little bit about some of the practices that farmers are beginning to adopt in order to become more profitable, to restore fertility to their soils, restore wildlife habitat, and sequester carbon?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think most people that are watching this will know probably a lot more about this than I do. But I've tried to immerse myself in the last 6 months to a year to really understand what's happening around the regenerative agriculture and the idea that the soil is never really dead. It can come back alive if the proper techniques are used. And so, we all see what's happening with the industrial ag system that we have now. Obviously, there's monopolies that are dominating this industry. We see it in all over the country, but I've learned a lot about that in Iowa, out campaigning there. We see the algae blooms. We see the dead zone at the mouth of the Mississippi River, and you said there's 200 plus around the world. And Dr. Mark Hyman, I was with him the other day, and he was telling me that there's 220,000 metric tons of fish that are killed every year at the mouth of the Mississippi River in that dead zone there. So it's really good, healthy, lean protein, and it's the fertilizer runoff that's happening because the ground's so hard when it rains, it goes into the rivers and rushes down there. So we have the algae blooms, we have the soil that's been destroyed, we have these huge dead zones where it's killing fish, wrecking the fishing industry. That's what we're dealing with. So as someone running for president, someone who sits in Congress, someone who sits on the appropriations committee where we're trying to fund these problems, I'm tired of us always trying to put the Band-Aid on something, right? So how do we deal with the dead zone? How do we deal with farmers who aren't making money? How do we deal with algae blooms? How do we deal with the fishing industry that's being hurt? I want us to get to the root cause of these problems, and that means moving to regenerative ag, reducing the pesticide use, reducing the fertilizer use, which will enhance the soil, build resiliency around drought and flooding, and obviously sequester carbon, which is a big initiative for climate. So benefit, and the farmers are making money versus destroy the environment, destroy the rivers, destroy fish, destroy the fishing industry, and have algae blooms all over the country. So to me, this makes the most sense at getting really to the root cause of the problem.
We need to heal the land to heal the oceans, and give them a chance to come back.
And heal the farmers, and heal the economy, and heal rural America. It's all really tied together.
Some people have expressed the view that regenerative agriculture is in a way a distraction from other efforts that need to be taken to help address climate change. And I'm sure you feel the view of Soil4Climate, which is that cutting emissions is absolutely crucial, but it's not good enough. We also need to get the excess carbon out of the atmosphere. Back in 2013, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said specifically that we would be facing centuries of warming unless the only exception they gave was if we could draw down a massive amount of carbon out of the atmosphere, and in so doing, restoring our ecosystems. So, okay, I'm glad we're on the same page.
We're on the same page, yeah. Well, if I could just say, I mean, that's a sign of the times. I mean, this is what I'm trying to do to get rid of it. I keep saying it's not left or right now, it's new and better. Like, how do we get out of this left or right? So here's another perfect example of, well, it's got to be either or. It's either, you reduce emissions, or you do the soil piece where you're sequestering carbon. It's like, no, like, who lives in that kind of world that it's so black and white? It's both and new and better. And if we have an initiative where we're capturing carbon, we're building electric vehicles, we're building batteries, we're building charging stations, we're building solar, we're building wind turbines, and capturing carbon, helping our farmers, it's like a holistic approach. And so it's whole foods. For education, we should educate the whole child, for the economy, we should make sure that it's a holistic approach concerning stakeholders, not just shareholders, which means workers and the environment. So everything that I think new and better means holistic approach and getting to the root cause of the problem. And this is the perfect example of really trying to get to the root cause of the problem, and all the healing goes from there.
Absolutely. Approximately 1/3 of the agricultural land in America is used for growing crops, and approximately 2/3 are used for grazing. Many may not be aware, but most crops will grow only in places that get about 20 inches or more of rain annually. And there are large parts of the country that get significantly less than that. Grasses need as little as 6 inches of rain in order to thrive. So there are large areas that cannot be used for growing crops, but can be used for grazing, and in fact need to be, because if the land in these regions are not grazed, grass plants ultimately shade themselves to death. The land turns into desert. We've seen that happen in large parts of Texas and Arizona, New Mexico, places that just a few hundreds of years ago used to be grasslands as tall as people on horseback.
Wow.
And I would also share that when Lewis and Clark, back in the early 1800s, traversed the country, estimates are that there were as many as 65 million bison maintaining the health of the prairies in North America, and everywhere was abundant wildlife, pristine drinking water, and some of the world's deepest, richest soils.
Wow.
I mention that because often people think that cows are somehow inherently bad for the climate or bad for the environment. And what a lot of the new research is showing is that, in fact, when cows are grazed properly, that is to say in a way that mimics or emulates how they grazed for millions of years,
Yeah.
they can in fact contribute greatly to our environmental goals and the climate that we all want. Having spoken with Gabe Brown, I'm wondering if, how your views on cows are these days. And,
Yeah.
and what can we do to support the grazing community?
Well, again, it's about the grass-fed. Someone asked me in Iowa the other day, "Are you against meat?" They hear me talk about health, and they hear me talk about agriculture and all this regenerative, and they say, "Well, are you against me?" It's no. I said, but ideally, we want to move to a system where we're talking about grazing, we're talking about cows eating grass, novel concept. When their evolution was designed for them to eat grass, and how do we move into supporting that move in that direction? Boo.
Sorry.
But yeah, and to me, again, it's not this either or, because we live in a society that's like, well, ban that, like, don't do it. Well, it's like, okay, time out, let's talk about it. And to hear, and you may know, I can't remember exactly what Gabe said, but he was talking about, because we hear with like the Green New Deal is like, and we hear about flatulence and cow flatulence and all this stuff and how bad it is for the environment. Maybe you can remind me what Gabe told me about how grass-fed cows, that there's something that happens there that deals with the carbon, right?
Sure.
You know what that is?
Yeah, there are a couple of issues. Number one is that when the cows are grazed properly, the grass tends to be much higher quality forage. So it has less cellulose, which means that there's less methane being produced, the better quality of the grass, number one. And number two, there was a research paper that came out just last year from Michigan State University by Paige Stanley and Jason Roundtree. And what they showed is that during the beef finishing phase, if cows are grazed properly, they end up sequestering more than enough carbon in soil to offset any of the greenhouse gases, or all of the greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide and the methane produced during the production of beef. In fact, as we were discussing a few minutes ago, at White Oak Pastures Farm in Bluffton, Georgia, Will Harris's operation, General Mills recently performed a life cycle assessment that showed that for every pound of regenerative beef produced at White Oak Pastures, about 3.5 pounds of atmospheric carbon dioxide were sequestered. So agriculture is unique in being the only sector of the economy that can not only reduce its emissions, as every transportation, housing, power generation, all of the sectors have to cut their emissions, but only agriculture has that superpower of being able to turn the dial below zero. And what was interesting is that the same life cycle assessment showed that some of the artificial fake meat, I'll call them, plant-based burgers, others call them, actually have a positive carbon footprint. So while it's true that the plant-based burgers produce less emissions than the conventional industrial animal agriculture, no argument there. In fact, they're still contributing to global warming, whereas regenerative beef is actually undoing the impact of global warming and putting us in reverse instead of just slowing down the train, if you will.
I don't know. I get so excited when I hear things like that because I mean, I'm 46 years old and we have 3 kids. So Mason's 16, Bella's 15, and Brady, our little guy, is 5. And I think about what we want to do to reverse climate change and like really put systems in place that are effective and real solutions, not just some propaganda or something that somebody said that sounds good, but actually solving these problems. And to do it in a way where, you know, a lot of people, you know, if you start saying, well, don't eat meat or ban meat or those kind of things, well, a lot of people don't want to stop eating meat. But I think if we can come in with this idea of, look, this is actually how things used to be. This is how we build out that old system that used to happen here. That is good for the environment and good for our health and you know, negative footprint. I mean, that's amazing. So let's do it. And I mean, so what I want is the federal government and the most powerful government in the world to lead on these things, to really show the initiatives, put the power, the weight, the resources of the federal government behind these things. And what I did learn from Gabe and Alan Williams is that, like, we can literally get to a point where we can start reducing subsidies for farmers because they're all making money. And they talk to Gabe and he says, I don't even take the subsidies because he's making money, and learning that this can really happen within like a year or two. The regenerative farmers can start making money. So how do we build that system out and do, you know, Gabe and Alan are doing as far as building teams out in each state to really help farmers learn how to do this in a very quick way? Is there something that we would need to do from the federal government side to help the transition with farmers who may have made some, you know, significant capital investments or made investments for the old system? And how can we help them get into the new system? And we certainly would need to sit down and talk to farmers and Gabe and Alan and others about how we would do that and actually do it in a very thoughtful way. But think about reducing the hundreds of billions of dollars that we spend on subsidies, crop insurance, and all of these things and all of these programs. If we could start reducing that, the money we would have to reinvest back into rural America for infrastructure, for water and sewer, for cleaning up the rivers that have been polluted, for renovating theaters and building up the downtowns with river walks and amphitheaters and bike trails. Like everywhere I go, you know, and I represent a lot of these communities, they have these beautiful little downtowns. There's a great courthouse. There's an old movie theater that the community's trying to get renovated. So if we can reduce the subsidies to the farmers, they're making more money than they ever have. Hopefully, if we build the system up and then take money and help broadband and, you know, the schools and the hospitals in these local communities, we use that money to build that back up. To me, that's a very unifying approach. That's not asking for more money, but reducing money and kind of rearranging on how we invest it in rural America.
I think that answers one of the questions that Gabe Brown had actually submitted for the interview, which was, what are some of the non-governmental, the non-policy ways that we can achieve these goals? And certainly by reducing federal funding for programs that are not giving us the results that we want, can help to ensure that funds are available for other purposes, like community redevelopment and so forth. So I think that's important.
Well, and a lot of the, you know, the average age of the farmer, I hear different statistics, but it's like 59 or 60 years old. So how do we, you know, maybe use some incentives too to help veterans get into regenerative agriculture, younger people with regenerative agriculture who may have student loans. I met several people out in Iowa who were younger, just doing it on the side. and obviously slow to get things building out. They can't afford health care. They have student loans, but now they're interested in this. So how do we move them into regenerative agriculture? I just want the government to be smart. I don't think I want the government to do as little as it has to do, but there are certain things that it may need to do. And so if we can build that system out, again, sitting down with farmers, working with Gabe and Alan and others who are really experts in how to build this thing out, and then creating this new system that is really going to change the trajectory of the country.
We've seen just in the last year or so the rise of groups affiliated with Extinction Rebellion, as more and more people realize the harm being done to the planet threatens the insect population, the bird population. We've seen collapse of the honeybees, and so forth. And I think it's important, as we're talking partly about grazing, to recognize that on a well-managed farm, the animals would typically occupy only about 3% of the space at any given time, and 97% of the space on the farm is available for wildlife. It's sometimes a bit counterintuitive at first blush for people to realize that proper grazing isn't just about the cows. It's in fact enabling, the fox and the beaver population, the wolves, the songbirds, the insects. In fact, some of the most verdant and thriving places I've ever been have been farms or ranches, where the animals are absolutely playing the key role, a keystone role in creating the wildlife habitat. So anyway, I just wanted to get that point out. And I would also like to thank my colleague, Seth Itzkan, the co-founder of Soil4Climate, just to give him a shout out.
Hi, Seth.
Who's here with us today, helping out and
Hi, everybody.
Taking care of some of the technical details here.
And we tried to talk Seth into taking his jacket off. He would not do it. That's how professional he is.
We're not wearing, at least we're not making you wear the hat. We'll get to that later. Okay, so a couple of points or questions that some of our members have submitted. One came in from Mary Nethery, talking about there's a subject that was new to me called regenerative infrastructure, which is changing some of the zoning codes or code requirements so that when parklands or roads, creekways are developed, the soil next to the roads are also being improved. And as I said, there was a new term for me, but you want to make sure you were familiar with it. I don't know if it's a question or so much as a comment.
Yeah, no, but thanks. I've never heard of it before.
And
I can make something up.
Brady Kerwan asked if you favor paying farmers for ecological services, and by improving soil, for example, the soil will hold much more water, so it can help to prevent flooding. And so that's an important way. Now, of course, in the case of Texas, which recently got 50 inches of rain over a span of a couple of days, there's only so much that can be done in a circumstance like that. But Gabe Brown saw the infiltration rate of his soils go from about half an inch of rain per hour up to more than 8 inches of rain per hour. So a 16-fold improvement. And what that means is, flooding is not an issue. He can go 6 months without any rain, and he's in fine shape. So so for communities that are threatened by flooding, is that something you would look at?
And well, here's the deal. I think, in talking to Gabe about this, I want the government to do what it needs to do to help move people in this direction. But, what he's saying and others are saying is that, maybe we need to educate people on how to do this. And once they do it, they're going to be making money off of it. So there's no need to subsidize or incentivize. Now, maybe we have to, if we want to expedite it, we can say, okay, here's a 3-year plan to get people converted over to it. And then the program's going to end or phase out. But maybe you have a window that we can help, especially given everything farmers have been through now in the last 5 years. I want to really give them a lifeline and some hope to incentivize them, because we're trying to really break through culturally of generations of this is how we do it, and I'm afraid to change. And what we want to say, and we're trying to do here, is to say, look, there's some politicians out here that get it, that want to help you. There's people like Gabe and Alan and yourself who are going to say, look, you can make money off this in a relatively short period of time, and you're not going to need to go fill out all these forms and go to the local ag office. I would like to build out the ag extension offices around the United States to actually help people convert over and put teams together in these states, whether it's the Ag Extension or the USDA, but really help people learn how to do it. So I'm open to the idea of incentivizing this, incentivizing sequestering carbon, but at the end of the day, that may just be needed to expedite things and get things going faster. But from what I'm learning, that people are going to start making money off this. And so, you know, we can reduce that, and we can build theaters and build your downtowns up and make sure that the hospital is open with, you know, maternity care or whatever, because we're seeing so many hospitals in rural America close down, or at least close down programs, and like maternity care. And you know, even with schools, I mean, the amount of travel that kids have to do on buses today in rural America. So this is about getting farmers to make money, reducing those subsidies, and then saying, okay, how do we increase the quality of life in rural America, and maybe spend money on those things to help people in the United States and rural America have the kind of quality of life that they deserve with their schools, with their health care and other things.
On the legislative and policy side, I would like to mention that California and Australia have programs in place to actually pay farmers to sequester carbon. Approximately a dozen states throughout the U.S. have either passed or are considering healthy soil legislation. And of course, in each state, there are variations depending on what's most appropriate for that state. In New Mexico, just a few months ago, a healthy soil bill passed with overwhelming support from both houses, which I think helps to reinforce the point that that soil appears to be as American as baseball and apple pie. I mean, nobody doesn't love it. Soil4Climate, of course, the main focus of our organization is soil as a climate solution. But we also have encountered many farmers who may not yet accept the climate science, and yet are wholeheartedly adopting these practices and principles because they want to leave it for their children. They love wildlife, you know, even if the reason is because they like hunting, you know, and they you know, want to become more profitable and more resilient. So, you know, our hats are off to them, you know, whatever the motivation is.
I love this. Like you know, I believe that climate is caused by man, and like, but here we are in 2019 in a divided country, and we literally have an issue like Soil4Climate, regenerative agriculture, where literally you have like conservative, Republican, or libertarian farmers who don't think the climate issue is caused by man, that it's part of a natural cycle, but they're really excited and are right now sequestering carbon and building the soil and using less pesticides and everything else. And then you have, you know, liberal Democrats who want pesticides off their food. They want to really address the climate issue and everything else, agreeing on a path forward. And so this is what I'm trying to say. I'm like, let's find these issues that we can agree on and move forward on them where we have bipartisan support. And to think about this is a huge, you want to talk about revolutionary, this is amazing and doable, because all of a sudden Republican rural farmers are going to call the Republican senators and say, hey, President Tim Ryan is pushing this bill on regenerative ag and we want your support. And then the liberal Democrats are going to say, you know, I'm going to call them and say, hey, you know, we've got a coalition here to really make, I mean, this is, to me, is what's exciting. I talked about my kids. Like, I want to be that president, like, that says, guys, we did this for you. We got this done. And we boosted rural America, and we boosted farmers' incomes, and we cleaned the environment, and we boosted the soil, and we moved to grass-fed meat and reduced antibiotics and reduced hormone use in the food, which is going to reduce healthcare costs, which is going to save money so we can invest in education and research and winning the future. To me, like, what are we talking about here? This is win all the way around. Like, we, as politicians, we should be like, because right now the whole deal is, how can I tell you everything you want to hear and nothing that they want to hear, and then we're not going to get anything done. I want to say, you are for this, and you are for this, and I'm the president, and let's go do it. I mean, to me, what could be
Sounds
more
great.
exciting than that?
There's a wonderful line in a poem, Ode to Dirt, by Sharon Olds, which is "Soil is our democracy." And I think that kind of encapsulates some of what you're saying here.
Nice.
And I'll post that subsequently in the comments. We'd like to move over to taking some questions from our Facebook audience, and thank you so much, all of you who are watching. And Seth, would you like to turn it slightly? Sure. Do you want to hang on a second?
Hi, Congressman Ryan. Again, thank you so much for being with the Soil4Climate community
Thank
today.
you.
We greatly appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And just from my own personal experience, I want to say to you and to our viewers that I believe that the soil is the unifying force politically, because you know, frankly, so many of the land managers and grazers are on the conservative side of the aisle, but they totally understand the role of soil. And then in quote unquote environmentalists are typically, you know, on the more liberal side, and soil really does seem to be the thing that we can, you know, agree on at least. So we do have some questions from.
We can agree on soil.
We can agree on soil. Okay.
I love it.
So anyway, there are some questions that have come in while you're talking, and they've sort of been answered in a way, but I want to give voice to the people who have been asking questions in real time. Let me just say the three of them, and you can answer them. One is the relationship between healthy soil and health care. I know that's a good one. Just hold on to that. Yeah. The other was the bit about the regenerative infrastructure. Apparently, this is happening now in San Antonio, where they're saying it has to be part of the design standards somehow. I haven't heard about it before just now, but apparently that the example is out there.
Great.
And the other is in California, California's Healthy Soils program. They are apparently providing funds for cover crops and for compost applications on farms. And could something like that be a model for a national program?
Great, great.
So
yes,
healthcare,
cool. Yes,
healthcare,
Yeah.
infrastructure, and the California.
Well, again, holistic, right? Holistic solutions to the problems that we have. So we spend 2.5 times as much on healthcare as every other industrialized country, and we get the worst results. And about 75% of those healthcare costs are for chronic diseases that are largely preventable. And a lot of those diseases, heart disease, high blood pressure, mostly caused from inflammation, diet-related inflammation. Type 2 diabetes has almost everything to do with diet. And these things are reversible. You can reduce inflammation in your body through your diet and stress reduction, as we started this whole thing out. Those are the two real killers, quite frankly. And they cause inflammation to your body, so your body inflames, and then it inflames your heart. You get heart disease, and inflames your body, and you get high blood pressure. You get disease, dis-ease. Your body's not doing well. So one of the solutions to reducing healthcare costs and reversing things like type 2 diabetes is using food as medicine. And we have seen this happening now across the United States in different pockets where a diabetic in half the country now has either diabetes or pre-diabetes, half the adult population. And a diabetic costs us about $14,000 a year for type 2 diabetes. And so initiatives like food as medicine are literally reversing type 2 diabetes and getting people off of their medications. I met a woman in Iowa who lost 90 pounds. She just happened to fall into a program that was doing food as medicine with other supports as well. For $5,000 one time, you can reverse type 2 diabetes. And instead of $14,000 a year, every single year to manage type 2 diabetes. But what do we need? We need healthy food, and we need it to be readily available everywhere, not just for those people who are going to reverse type 2 diabetes, but how do we prevent heart disease, prevent high blood pressure, prevent inflammation, prevent type 2 diabetes by making sure that this healthy food that comes from regenerative agriculture is readily available to people. And that's why I also want to build out a huge urban agriculture program in our cities that have shrunk from a couple 100,000 people down to 50, 60, 70,000 people. How do we clear out those old dilapidated homes, build up urban agriculture, create summer jobs, create after-school jobs. How do we tie the food as medicine to the school curriculum in our schools? How do we have school gardens? How do we have salad bars in our schools? How do we have literally have kitchens that kids can learn how to cook?
Mm-hmm.
You know, grow the food, plant food, grow the food, pick the food, cook the food, and learn how to live in a healthy way. So this whole idea around health can't just be focused around health insurance, although that's really important because people need to be covered. But it also needs to be, how do we build this system out to reduce the $3.5 trillion in chronic disease costs, get that number down. So, I mean, I want people to see this whole thing happening here. Like, the whole vision is like, okay, how do we get the soil healthy? How do we get the environment healthy? Reduce all of these expenditures on crop insurance and subsidies and everything else. And then from the healthcare side, how do we get us healthy by using the healthy food that's coming from the farms to reduce healthcare expenditures too? I mean, we have $1 trillion a year annual deficit. We have a $22 trillion debt for the country, and $1 trillion a year annual deficits that we've got to get under control. So it's not just raise taxes and pay the debt down. It's we got investments to make too. And so what I'm saying is get to the root of the problem. So the healthy soil, healthy environment, healthy ag, healthy food leads to reduction in healthcare costs, and literally helping people pay for and buy. And if we get more of this healthy food, the cost is going to go down too. So then it's going to be more affordable for everybody to do it, and we can do it in urban areas. I would also like to see us, as we do this, create markets for our regenerative farmers around prisons, selling this food to prisons, like public expenditures on prisons. That's a huge market. And quite frankly, there are studies coming online now saying how bad the food is for our prisoners. And we know that this highly processed food affects your microbiome, which I don't talk a whole lot about unless I'm on with you guys. You would actually understand that, you know, it screws up your gut health, and they're drawing correlations between your gut health and your emotions and your mental state, and depression and other mental health issues is tied to your diet and the erosion of the balance in your gut bacteria, just like the soil, you know, just like the soil. So universities, you know, you think of places like Ohio State, which is 55, 60,000 students right in central Ohio. We have all kinds of other universities surrounded by rural America. So if we can move these public universities, colleges, and all the rest to start buying more, spending more of their money on you know, real food, that's another market. And then all of our public schools, K through 12, incentivize them to purchase. So you're building out rural America, but you're also building out the markets for people. And so it all ties together in one big, happy, policy wonky thing.
Can I interject a question real quick? A good one just came in through Facebook from Shari Phil. She says, what will you do to encourage more young people to get involved in regenerative farming and have more diversified family farms instead of huge corporate farms? And she started with a statistic saying that most farmers and land managers are getting older and older. So
yeah,
how do we get the younger generation?
Well, I think you could do things like loan forgiveness, because a lot of people went and studied something else and then found themselves getting interested in regenerative agriculture and really want to do something for the environment. And they want to, you know, they want that lifestyle too. You could do some loan forgiveness, student debt forgiveness to move them in. I think helping veterans move into you know, regenerative ag would be something very significant. But look, we also, you know, maybe from some of the savings, we also need to invest into our colleges and university programs, because right now they're getting a lot of money from Bayer and Monsanto and all these other companies that are kind of getting you on the hook and teaching you how to do it the old-fashioned way. And so we need publicly funded investments into colleges and universities so that we can teach regenerative ag, because again, the market, the current monopoly in ag is funding and teaching people how to do it the old way, so that they use all the pesticides and buy all the fertilizer and do it the old-fashioned way. So the only other way to combat it, I mean, I only think the government should do things that will not happen, and there's a lot of value to it. Mm-hmm. And so these would be very good investments for the taxpayer to make into coaching people up as they're coming through schools. I mean, the more I talk to you guys, the more I realize you're all amazing scientists, biologists, and figuring out how to make all this work. And we need to teach that in our schools. And if our schools are solely reliant, because of the cuts over the last 20 to 30 years to public education and public colleges and universities, those institutions rely on private sector investments. Mm-hmm. And so then the school is going to teach with that private sector money what's going to help boost the private sector. And so it's not just a monopoly in the sense of the market. It's also the feedstock for continuing that old broken system. And so we'll need public investments into teaching people how to do this, because there's not a whole, I mean, the only person who's going to make money is the farmer. Mm-hmm. So there's no other interest really there, I don't think. Mm-hmm. If there is, maybe we can figure out how to partner with them. But again, if you get these companies too, like General Mills, that are doing the good work, that want to move in this direction, maybe General Mills needs to help in a public-private partnership with colleges and universities about the new way of doing things.
Absolutely. And just to touch back on the health issue, there is quite a body of evidence now showing how over the last several generations, food has presently contains much less nutrition in terms of various minerals, 30, 50, 70% reductions in some cases. Just a shout out, a wonderful paper came out this spring by Fred Provenza showing that the healthier the soil is, the healthier the plants are, which translates directly into animal health and human health. Yeah, ultimately. Makes sense. So there's absolutely.
I wrote about that in Real Food Revolution. I wrote about, I think I mentioned carrots or oranges. I wrote it a while back.
Oranges apparently have no vitamin C, or some oranges anyway.
Yeah, you have to eat like 6 or 7 carrots to get the nutrients.
They look the same, but you just don't know.
They're even more orange. Yeah. But I mean, that's and this is what is really interesting about the political coalition is moms, especially. I call them whole food moms. They know. I mean, they are aware that there's too many pesticides. They're aware that the food is not carrying the nutritional value that it used to have, and play that out over decades, which we're dealing with now. And you see diabetes epidemic, you see obesity epidemic, you see kids not as healthy as they used to be. And so, yeah, it's a huge issue.
Just want to do a quick time check, and we're going to wrap up after 45 minutes, but if you have a few more minutes.
Probably stick around just a couple more.
Seth, do you have another question?
I just wanted to give you real-time feedback. The loan forgiveness, real-time feedback here, the loan forgiveness for new farmers is getting a lot of thumbs up.
Okay, okay. I'll get right on it.
People like that one, yeah, okay.
Yeah, the other thing too is, with I think that could help people convert over. Healthcare is such a huge issue in the country. I think everybody knows it. But have a provision where one of my reforms is to allow small businesses to be able to buy into the Medicare program, because small businesses are getting crushed with healthcare costs today. And so you can get into a real stable insurance pool. So maybe another incentive along with the loan forgiveness is allow these farmers to buy into the Medicare program in order to incentivize them to get moving, because we got to build it out, and there got to be some incentives to help people move into the new system.
Seth, is there another question you'd like to share?
Not right at this second.
Okay. Yeah. Something else I'd like to touch on earlier. Sometimes people have asked, is there enough land for all of the meat to be grass-fed, for example? And I just want to make reference to some research that has shown that the carrying capacity, that is to say the number of animals the land can support, has gone up either double or triple in some cases, or even more when the land is properly managed and the grasses come back and begin growing again. So we are confident in the new science that's showing, in fact, eventually all of the animal agriculture or beef production can be put back on pasture. And so improving the environment. And if you're not growing the grains, the corn and the soy to feed the animals, then that land can be put back into pasture, and in many cases, improving the picture for wildlife and the other benefits that we spoke of.
I love it. I love it.
So, so maybe this is a good point to wrap up. And we apologize. There were a lot of great questions coming in, and obviously we didn't get to cover everything. But very much appreciate your tuning in and sharing this time with the Congressman, and we wish you all the best.
Yeah, appreciate it. They can go to timryanforamerica.com, and you'll see videos, and I'm out in the farms, and every stop I make along the way, I'm trying to hit a regenerative farm to help highlight many instances the media is following me, and really try to breathe life into this, and really, because we don't have time. I mean, that's the thing. And so if you timryanforamerica.com, you'll see more about policy initiatives, and I think we're gonna try to do something with Gabe and Alan too, in the next few weeks, and really try to promote this in maybe a town hall style where we kind of do what we're doing here. We're really getting the questions and letting people know this is real. There is a real candidate talking about this all the time. And just real quick, I was in New Hampshire last night, and just an average political picnic with 75, 100 people in a backyard on a farm that's growing fruits, and had solar panels. It was really cool. But anyway, I give my pitch, right, and I talk about regenerative agriculture, and I talk about food as medicine. And I had a handful of people come up to me after, I want to volunteer on the campaign. Because it spoke to their interest. So I'm just sharing that to say to the people watching this that there are people all over the country that want to drive this issue like you are here, because they see the real benefits of it. So I appreciate everything that everyone's doing, and glad I'm on the team now and carrying the flag.
We're very grateful to you for bringing this issue to the national stage, literally and figuratively. There are different video clips of Tim Ryan public statements that he's made in support of regenerative agriculture at the Soil4Climate Facebook group. If you're not yet a member of the group, we encourage you to join. We have over 12,000 members from more than 100 countries around the world. So this is not just a national topic, but truly a growing worldwide issue of interest for people everywhere. So last shout out, this is to Stonyfield Organics, that's hosting a presidential forum coming up this Thursday in Londonderry, New Hampshire. There will be 3 presidential candidates, including Tim Ryan. So if you'd like to see him in person and hear him speak, there's an opportunity for anyone who's in the New England area. So.
I'll be there. New and better, not left or right. New and better.
Sounds great. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks. Hey, we're going to do this?
Thank you. You want to put that? Here we go. The official, the hat ceremony.
You got to put it on.
I'll put it on.
There you go. Now it's real.
That's it.
Now it's real. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So long, everyone. Thanks for joining us.